I want to tell you a story, and at the end, I want you to tell me what you think. Let's say that I was in charge of America, and it just so happens that I'm a big fan of ExxonMobil, because I think their gasoline is just awesome. Now, I know there's evidence that Chevron makes pretty good gas. In fact, it seems some countries have been using Chevron for years now, and it appears that their cars have actually been faring better than ours here. But I'm in charge, so I'm going to invest the government's money, what used to be your money, billions of it, into Exxon. And then in a couple months, I'm going to approve only the use of Exxon gas. I'm going to force everyone in the country to use Exxon, essentially eliminating free choice.
What?
I can do that because I'm in charge of America. It will be like a gas mandate. And when you go somewhere, I'm going to make you prove that you used Exxon gas to get there. And if you don't use Exxon, then it will be law that you can't go anywhere. Because everywhere you go, I'm going to force businesses to check and make sure that you use Exxon gas to get there. And if you didn't, you have to go back home and cover your car. We'll call that a gas passport. You fill up with Exxon and you get a gas passport for like a week. No gas passport? Well, then you're not going anywhere. No commuting to work and no travel. Meanwhile, because of my gas mandate and my gas passport, Exxon profits will soar 30,000%. And because of this unprecedented growth, they'll have to pay me, the government, because I'm in charge, some serious royalties for my investment, approval, and mandate. Okay, story's over. Let me ask you, what do you think? Does that sound fair?
No, I don't think so.
Does it sound like a good idea, or does it sound unfair? Is it an overreach, or maybe it's an abuse of power? Or does it even sound criminal? Now, hold that thought. Let me quickly tell you another story, similar but true. Clearly, I'm not in charge of America. The US government is. The CDC, a government agency, has military ranks. They can order mandates under the banner of national security. The government can and has invested money, billions, into big pharma for new drugs and vaccines. The NIH, a government agency, partners with pharma to create a vaccine. The FDA, a government agency, then approves that vaccine that they help create. Then the CDC can mandate that vaccine. The vaccine produces incredible new profits to the tune of tens and tens of billions of dollars, and royalties from those patents and profits eventually make their way back to the government. Meanwhile, you have a small company with zero track record grow by 30,000% in 2 years. The government invests, in the case of Moderna, $955 million. Then the NIH helps Moderna invent a vaccine. The FDA approves it, the CDC mandates it, and the patents and profits are eventually shared with the government. Moderna, a company still in diapers by big pharma standards, was just a $60 million company in 2019 with not one commercial product. They made $18 billion last year. They now have one single commercial product, a vaccine. They went from 60 million to 18 billion in 24 months. That's 30,000% growth. The government controlled the investment, the vax creation, the approval, and the mandate. And no one has more influence over that circle of trust, the NIH, the FDA, the CDC, than this guy. It's a lot of power, and this story is true. Now, let me issue a small social warning here. Some of what I'm about to say is probably going to rub against your political leanings if you're a big fan of one party and despise the other, because I'm going to show you that both parties are equally guilty concerning the topics I'm going to discuss. The problem in front of us right now is way bigger than tired old lame partisan politics.
It's true.
So let me ask this question. When did Americans all of a sudden become so incredibly trusting of big pharma? If we look at history, we can see that four of the biggest pharmas, Pfizer, GSK, Merck, and Sanofi, all makers of vaccines, have paid $35 billion in criminal fines and penalties in the last 10 years. That's their drugs, their practices, harming people, even killing people. All of the largest lawsuits in the last 40 years have been against big pharma. The largest criminal penalties ever assessed in history are against big pharma. Yet somehow, well, I'll show you how, America now blindly trusts them like they're blood relatives. Take a company like Pfizer, one of the many pharma serial felons, who, by the way, has paid well over $10 billion in fines since 2000 for lies, kickbacks, false advertising, corrupt marketing, bribes, suppressing adverse trial results, and just an encyclopedia of criminal convictions and jury awards. Even the NIH calls Pfizer a habitual offender, persistently engaging in illegal and corrupt practices. Sounds real trustworthy, right? We don't even know how crooked Moderna is because they've only been around for like 5 minutes. But $10 billion in Pfizer penalties in 20 years, that comes out to roughly $500 million per year. Last year, they made $63 billion, just last year. So that's $10 billion in fines over 20 years and $63 billion in revenue just last year alone. Since 2000, the years adding up to $10 billion in Pfizer fines, they made $1.1 trillion. So do you think they care about $10 billion in fines for lies, false advertising, kickbacks, and suppressing trial results and harmful drugs? It's not even 1% of their revenue over the same period. They also pay about 6% in taxes. So what's the point? Well, the point is Big Pharma is big rich. In fact, they're not rich, they're wealthy. They are so wealthy that you can punch all of Big Pharma collectively with $35 billion in criminal penalties over 10 years, and they're like, wow, I feel like there's some small, microscopic, almost non-existent itch somewhere on my back. Maybe I'll scratch it with one of my billion-dollar bills. Pharma is a $1.27 trillion industry every year. A handful of billion-dollar fines to them is the equivalent of you or I spilling an overpriced cup of coffee. At the most, an inconvenience, but it simply doesn't matter financially. Now, I'm not telling you what to think. You can go watch the news if you need help with that. I'm just passing along information that I welcome you to fact check. You can draw your own conclusions. But speaking of facts, did you know that America has 4.2% of the world's population, but 16% of the COVID deaths? Do you understand how incredibly out of whack that is? 4% of the people and 16% of the deaths worldwide. That begs the question, what exactly was our COVID response? Because the numbers suggested our response was terrible and exceptionally deadly, but also insanely record-breaking profitable. India, where it seems there's 1, maybe 2 people per square foot, has a staggering 18% of the world's population, but only 8.7% of the COVID deaths. So they did 7 to 8 times better than we did. America lost 1 person per 360 people, and India lost 1 person per 2,700. Or take Africa, for example. They only lost 1 person per 5,400 people. Now, one might argue that America is somewhat more developed than any country in Africa, but they fared almost 15 times better than we did. Could it be because they've been using Chevron gas in their cars for years while we were forced to use Exxon? I honestly don't know why, but there's definitely a reason somewhere. It's at least worth looking into. I feel like Africa should get a trophy for their COVID response, and we should get, well, placed under investigation. America is a global superpower, possibly the most advanced country on the planet, yet we did awful. Our COVID response was abysmal, darn near the worst. I'll close with this. Health is personal. Let me explain. I have asthma, pretty bad. In fact, if I had a dime for every time I've been to the hospital for asthma, honestly, I'd probably have $5 or $6. I also have a rare liver disease. I didn't do anything to get it, and I can't do anything to cure it. It's an uncurable liver autoimmune disease whose mortality rate is 20 times worse than COVID. Is it going to take me out? I don't know yet. We'll have to wait and see. The doc says I'll probably outlast it long enough to be killed by something else, which is great news. But when Rona showed up on America's doorstep, I decided to break my nearly 5-year news fast. I'm not a big fan of the news, national news specifically, your Fox Newses, your CNNs. Personally, I think they're full of it, just pushing incredibly polarizing agendas. But I decided to watch because I wanted to learn what all this COVID stuff was about. This trending disease that's killing between 0.5 and 1% of its infected. No matter the channel, this is what I heard. If you have a respiratory condition such as asthma, you are in a severe high-risk category of life-threatening COVID. If you have a liver illness, you are in a severe high-risk category of life-threatening COVID. So I'm thinking, well, that's great news. Lucky me, I have both. I guess I'm doomed. March of 2020, I was kind of scared. April and May, I wore a mask and gloves to the gas station and didn't go out much. Turned into a hermit crab like much of the rest of the country. I also worried that if I was out and about and pulled over by the cops, what would my excuse be for not obeying the national stay-at-home order? Remember the 2 weeks to flatten the curve? What a raging success that was.
I'm picking up your sarcasm.
Well, I should hope so, because I'm laying it on pretty thick.
But time went on and media-induced fear subsided, and when December 2020 rolled around, I got Rona, the original version, the OG. Felt a little tightness in my chest, like asthma, but certainly different and definitely not asthma. Felt some mild joint pains, some light headaches here and there. But 4 days after me getting Rona, we were supposed to go spend Christmas with my entire side of the family, about 20 people. I didn't feel sick, I was fully functioning, working out most every day, but deep down I knew I probably have it. So I got tested, PCR. It came back positive. I had it, big bad Rona. But I didn't feel like I had it. I felt at least 90% normal. That PCR test was on a Friday. But it didn't make sense to me because I wasn't near sick enough. I should be hanging on for dear life, right? I've got asthma. I've got a liver that's trying to kill me. According to the media, I should have spontaneously combusted into some epic COVID death explosion. After all, I was double severe high risk. But I felt 90% well. So I got tested again 3 days later, the Monday before Christmas. This time I did a rapid swab. The nurse took my swab out of the room, and before the door had time to close, she was already back in saying, "You have it, no doubt about it." She was kind of laughing. She said sometimes it takes several minutes for it to show up, but mine was apparently flaming positive. So I guess I really did have it. But the nurse was like, you're healthy, you'll be fine. For all intents and purposes, I was fine. But we didn't join my family for Christmas that year, we stayed home. I didn't want to risk getting anyone else sick. Now, fast forward to November 2021, 1 year later. Delta season had already come and gone, and Omicron was the new trend. And yay me, I got Omicron. Felt like an extremely mild 36-hour baby cold. Never really felt sick, just slightly off. But I sure didn't combust into some epic COVID death explosion like the media said I would. So I was glad, but kind of mad, because the news had been telling me that I was going to die. So early on I thought, man, if I get this disease, I'm toast. With my underlying conditions, it's over. Won't be able to walk my girls down the aisle, have grandkids, and so on and so forth. Now, have I gotten the jab? Well, no. Why would I? I've already had Rona twice, and it was literally a joke for me. My whole family's had it. Thankfully, complete and total non-events. And pretty much every single person I know who's been vaxxed has gotten it too. And one of my healthy vaccinated friends was hospitalized in the intensive care unit with myocarditis just days after getting his jab. He'll now have to have regular biannual cardio checkups for the rest of his life. So what's to gain if I put a serial felon's untested chemicals in my body? I still have to wear a mask where it's required, and it seems like my chances of getting the next version of Rona are just as good either way. I'm generally a healthy person, but by no accident. I've been taking vitamin D every day for years. I work out, I eat well, I'm not obese. I take care of my health, because my health is my problem. That's why it's personal. No one can eat right for me, no one can work out for me, and so no one should tell me or really legally mandate how to handle my health, because my health is my issue. And given the cards I've been dealt, I'd say I'm doing all right. And similarly, your health is your issue. And remember, outside of national defense and protecting us from invasion, our government tends to mess up pretty much everything they touch. Remember the Affordable Care Act?
We have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Health is going to be affordable, right? Your premiums and medical bills are going to go down, right? Question, did they? Medicare, Medicaid, how's that going? Most experts call it a legalized Ponzi scheme. Our postal system, bankrupt. Our healthcare system, completely broken. And 1 in 5 healthcare workers have quit in the last year or so. National debt, do we even need to go there? Do you know how much pork goes into every bill that's passed? It's disgusting. You think I'm going to put my personal health in those hands, the hands that mismanage practically everything they get involved with? I mean, no chance. This incredible rush over the last year to blindly trust big pharma and even bigger government, it's not even understandable. I'll stick to trusting my doctor, my family, my friends, and myself. That system has worked really well for me for decades now. That system has served our country well for over 200 years. That system isn't broken. So why am I saying all this? Well, for one, I just want to encourage you to think for yourself. What if you don't actually need to be protected from freedom?
Can you repeat the part of the stuff where you said all about the things?
What if you don't actually need to be protected from freedom? Just my opinion, but I think we've got to get out of this monkey see, monkey do whatever Tucker Carlson and Anderson Cooper say to do. Do your own research. Make your own decisions. You don't like what I've said? Awesome. Read multiple sources from multiple countries, investigate, and draw your own conclusions. It is possible. But listening to a politician who's been bought, or any one of the very few people that control 90% of our news media, I mean, it's not news. It's not even helpful information. It's literally called programming. Have you ever considered who they're programming? It's highly monetized agenda pushing that has been bought and paid for. And guess who's bought and paid for it? Huge surprise, Big Pharma. On average, Big Pharma's ad spend makes up over 70% of the media's annual ad revenue, essentially pricing out every other industry. So what you're hearing on the TV is what Pharma wants you to hear. Pharma also grossly outspends every other industry in political lobbying, in most cases by 3 to 1. So what you're hearing from Capitol Hill is what Pharma wants you to hear. And I know you may be like, Matt, come on, man, that's crazy. I agree. It is crazy. It's crazy that we allow them to control the message. It's crazy that Trump hired over 280 lobbyists into government-paid positions, and Biden's already hired over 40, some of which have landed at the highest levels of the FDA, the CDC, the HHS, and the NIH. No one, and I mean no one, can compete with Big Pharma's money. They're in control because we've paved a long road over many years that give them that control. I know I'm going long here, but listen, 2 countries in the world allow pharmaceutical advertising direct to the customer. 2. And yes, we're one of them. The entire rest of the smarter world is like, yeah, that's probably not a good idea. Want to hear something even crazier? You can't sue a vaccine company. Seems odd, right? If you happen to die or suffer injury from a vaccine, well, sorry about you. U.S. law has given them complete immunity. Title 42 of the U.S. Code, Section 300 AA-22, Standards and Responsibilities, subsection B, 1. No vaccine manufacturer shall be liable in a civil action for damages arising from vaccine-related injury or death associated with the administration of a vaccine after October 1st, 1988, if the injury or death result from side effects that were unavoidable even though the vaccine was properly prepared and was accompanied by proper directions and warning.
Good day, sir!
So there you have it, their certificate of legal immunity. The only immunity a vaccine is guaranteed to provide is for the company that made it.
Damn!
And speaking of warnings, here's a warning for you. FDA memorandum dated December 8th, 2021 regarding the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID vaccine. It mentions myocarditis 34 times. Yes, there actually is a myocarditis FDA warning on the Rona vaccine, which I guarantee was real hard for the FDA to even talk about since Big Pharma provides 45% of their annual budget in the form of industry user and EUA application fees. Yes, Big Pharma pays handsomely to have their drugs and vaccines fast-tracked. I mean, definitely no conflict of interest there. And listen, I'm not anti-vaccine. I've had tons of them. I'm a huge fan of drugs that are tested by time that underwent actual trials and double-blind tests. And I have lots of friends, immediate family even, that have gotten the jab. I 100% support and respect their decision. They did what they needed to do for them and their family because their health and their situation is personal. Everyone's circumstance is unique, which is why I think broad-stroking mandates is ridiculous. I'm retired, so I don't have a boss holding a paycheck over my head saying, get vaxxed or get fired. Thankfully, I don't have to live with that kind of stressful input bearing down on me. And me having had 2 severely lame cases of Rona already, I'm just quite all right for now going forward with my natural immunity. I work hard to be healthy, but the government saying, we don't think you can manage your personal health anymore, so we need to, just isn't gonna work for me. So let's run this quick experiment. Let's follow the money. Big Pharma spends over $300 million a year in political lobbying, far more than anyone else. So if you think our FDA is for sale, that's not even the half of it. Big Pharma spends that money to advance their agenda through favorable legislation, period. Pharma essentially has purchased the government narrative. That's what $300 million a year in lobbying gets you. Pharma also controls your television and the news it spews. They outspend every other industry in advertising by a long shot. If a national anchor makes $12 million a year, over $9 million of that comes from pharma. With that kind of money, they're not just controlling the narrative, they're dictating content. Our friend Mark Z also has personally invested over $1 billion into pharma and vaccine companies, so you only get a pro-pharma narrative from his networks as well. Same goes for Bill Gates. Google has invested hundreds of millions into its own vaccine company, so your search results for that giant are quite skewed as well. The reason why drugs that have been approved for decades now are shunned in the COVID narrative, but approved and recommended in other countries, is because there's no money in it here. No one makes trillions if you decide to eat right, exercise, take vitamin D, or use any other generic drug that thousands of nurses and doctors swear by. That agenda doesn't produce vaccine-style profits. And by vaccine-style profits, I mean tens and tens of billions of dollars that are barely taxed and are legally exempt from prosecution or liability. It's literally the very best kind of profit in the world. Truth is simply getting real hard to uncover because there are extremely powerful and wealthy forces at work pushing their own agenda with $1.27 trillion in annual revenue to protect. So let me end with a few questions. Do you think it's okay to allow pharmaceutical advertising direct to the customer? Do you think it's okay that vaccine companies are immune to legal liability? Are you okay with the fact that Big Pharma spends $300 million a year in lobbying on Capitol Hill for favorable legislation? Are you okay with the fact that Big Pharma spends more on marketing than they do on research and development? Should pharma be fined a few pennies when they repeatedly cross the ethical line, or should they face some other type of penalty? And finally, do you think it's okay for our government to control the vaccine investment, creation, approval, and mandate? I want to hear what you think in the comments below. Hey, thanks for watching. If you made it this far, maybe I struck a chord, so hit that like, subscribe, and ring that bell for me. Take care, y'all.